Good morning to all on this wonderful spring day, although it feels a little brisk out there today, but it sounds like it's going to get a little nicer. So welcome here this morning. We're here, my name is Tim Chapman, President and CEO of the Foundation, and we're here to recognize a very special person of Fort Hays State University and a special legacy gift that Dr. Howard Reynolds has left to Fort Hays State and specifically the Sternberg Museum. In addition to his profound impact on the university, we are honored to announce that as a state gift, including his collections to Fort Hays State and Sternberg, total over $800,000. While we'll miss his unique personality, very unique by the way, I think Joe will talk a little bit about that here in a minute. We're grateful that all of the institutions and the museums that he could have left his collections and gifts to, he decided to keep them here at his home, Fort Hays State University. Today we're going to be hearing from several people, some of his Howard's closest friends, Dr. Martin, president of the university, and we'll start with Dr. Joe Thomason here, who is a former student, colleague of Howard's, and really a caregiver of Howard's later in life. So Joe, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you, Tim. I want to welcome everybody here. I see a lot of local people, but Dr. Potter has come all the way from New York, I think is where he's at now. He went on many field trips with Howard, so he can verify some of the stories I might tell you about this. I did want to tell you that after everything is finished, I'll be glad to take in the back rooms of the herbarium where a lot of Howard's stuff is and show you some of the really amazing things that he left the university. If you probably count up the value of the specimens that Tim mentioned, it's probably well in excess of $1 million, to be honest with you. But the bequest that he gave us is going to allow us to prepare and curate all of the materials that he left us. I was his friend and in the end his caregiver, but Howard was an absolutely amazing person. At his core, he was a plant taxonomist. That's a person who loves to go out and identify things around you, and he always wanted to share that with people, and he shared that with a lot of people. He was a very social person. Those of you who knew Howard, if there was a meeting and there were people, he would come with his camera, and he was especially appreciative if there was a buffet or something. Howard loved food, and I always admired to the end, he told me he ate a little bit of everything. There was nothing that passed him that he didn't eat if he could eat it. He was a very complex man, and to think about, when I think about Howard, I think the person with the most curiosity I've ever met in my life was Howard. He was curious about everything, and it was totally amazing. Didn't matter what you were looking at, insects, plants, or whatever, his curiosity was supreme, and that was really amazing. He was a really sweet gentleman. I know when I first had him, when I was in his first class way back in 1965, we called him Happy Howard. And the reason was, no matter what we did, problems we caused occasionally as young students, he was happy. And so he was always that way. And at the end of the last 25 years when he was around, he would come to our family functions, and he would just show up sometimes in the spring. One of the things that I always really liked was he would show up every spring with a bouquet of flowers for my wife. And it would be just magnolias, or he'd go out and collect native things, but he would show up. And then he always came to the functions with the best homemade ice cream you ever tasted. And he did that right up until he was probably about 92 years old. So that was really amazing. He lived, and I brought by a mantra that I have over there, that he just thought you should spend your whole life learning about things as if you were going to live to be forever, but that you should live your life as if you were going to die tomorrow. And that's exactly how he did it. It was just astounding. He was born in Seward, Nebraska, in 1914 on a farm, and he grew up there. And I suspect that's where he got a lot of the influences and his love of botany and plant taxonomy and things like that. He was a meticulous record keeper, and we've got a lot of those materials now in the herbarium. From the age of 12 until he died, he kept daily records of things. And if you calculate that up, that's like something like 35,000 entries in his case. And he would talk about the various things that happened during the day. He would talk about plants, he'd talk about different things. But we have stuff in the herbarium from when he was age 12, 15, 28, 55, just the whole gamut of things. It's really stunning. Sherry at the archives told me it's the most complete archive record of anybody that she's dealt with in her history. He, at the age of 15, made a collection that we have in there that I know, and he used scientific terms and everything, very professional, that I know I had not a clue about until I took a course from him later on at the age of about 20. And yet he's got this detailed sort of thing there. So that's kind of a really remarkable thing. He went on to do a master's degree at the University of Nebraska on plants again from Richardson County, which are nearby. And then eventually he did a PhD at the University of Nebraska. He did that when he was, eventually got that when he was 59, but he met Dr. Tamanik during that period. And Dr. Tamanik actually hired him based on his knowledge of plants and so forth to come to Fort Hays. And I thought that was one of the best moves that Dr. Tamanik probably ever made as far as hiring people. I want to tell you just a little bit about Howard and his World War II experiences, because it made me really appreciate him in a way different from how we usually got together. Usually it was talks about flowers and stuff, but we were both veterans, and especially probably during the last 10, 15 years, we talked more and more, never did before then really, but we talked more and more about that experiences. And he told me one story one time about how, and he was in the South Pacific for 32 months. He was involved in 3 amphibious landings. And he told me this, and he told me this experience about, there's a saying about there are no atheists in foxholes. And Howard was a very religious person. And he told me, he said, he was in this foxhole, and he told me that saying, and then he said, and a 500-pound bomb landed near our foxhole. And he explained it to me, and he said, and it lifted me about this high, about 4 feet off the ground. He says, it dumped us right back in the ground. And I said to him, I said, well, how close was it? Because the concussion, you know, to do that. He said, well, he says, it's probably about 15 or 20 feet. And so that was just one conversation. And then another conversation he told me, and one of the guys in the foxhole with him was this person, and this was when he was probably in his 90s. This person was from the Bronx, and he gave me his name. Well, I knew the unit he was in, and I knew I should never have doubted Howard. He never exaggerated anything. I have learned that if Howard said this is the way it was, that's the way it was. And so I thought, well, so I went to Google, I typed the name in, I typed his unit in, I typed the Bronx in, and lo and behold, that person popped up. And sure enough, it was a real person that had been there in the foxhole with him. So that was just, to me, really stunning. It wasn't until later that I then ran across his diaries, his World War II diaries. And he has meticulous diaries about his World War II experiences in the South Pacific from 1943 through 1945. And I just, you know, they talk about heroes. Boy, he was one of them, because he talked about one night when the enemy soldiers were infiltrating the place. And this is little sweet Howard that I grew up with in the classroom and everything, and knew as a friend and everything. How he jumped on a 50 caliber machine gun and was spraying the woods with bullets. And I just thought, wow, I cannot believe it. This is him. But he would also talk about the mundane things, like he washed his clothes and these sorts of things. He was a malarial control officer is what he was. And so he would talk about the mundane things, and then he would jump to these things. And I just learned to have a great deal of respect for him, for the things he had been through, And then to come back and, in my case, for instance, to inspire me to spend a lifetime studying plants, especially grasses, which he loved. So it was just amazing to read those. And I really wanted those to probably go to the National Archives or somewhere. And Howard said no. And one thing about Howard, when he had his mind made up sometimes, that was the way it was going to be. And so I said to him something about that they should go in the National War Memorial Museum or someplace like that. I said, no, he wanted them here because he was locally and he thought the public would have better access to them. And so I said, well, that's fine. So all of these materials, by the way, outside of some that are in the herbarium, are now in the archives at Fort Hays State University. And it includes a little bit of everything with these meticulous records. In fact, when Frank walked through the door, I thought, oh my golly, I read a section where now I know where Howard's retirement party was. It was at Frank's house. And he said Frank gave a very good party. So I don't know what they did at the party, but anyhow. So anyhow, he was not just a remarkable man, he's a wonderful war hero. Between the war and 1957, he studied at Columbia University, St. Louis, and Washington. He taught at Texas A&M for 2 years. He spent untold number of hours in the field working for the Soil Conservation Service in Texas and so forth. And we have a lot of his specimens that he collected then. And then he studied under some of the real giants of biology. He was under, and maybe many of you probably don't know this, but Ernst Mayr was a giant in evolutionary biology. He studied under him, took courses under him. He did under a person by the name of Raymond Poole and Charles Bessey, who were remarkable plant taxonomists. I think he had, Reese and I were looking at his record one day, I think, what did he have, 41 botany courses? Something like that, covering every aspect of botany. It baffles the mind sometimes. And that's probably why he didn't have to exaggerate anything. If he said it was that, it was that. And he was always quizzing you on that, by the way. He wanted to make sure you kind of knew it, because I wore this tie in honor of him. It's a little kind of a gardening tie and stuff, and he loved it. He loved color, and he loved plants. And so I was so proud, you know, when I walked up to him at this, I thought he'll enjoy the color and everything. And he grabs the bottom of the tie and he pulls it up and he says, scientific name. So here I was, you know, 45, 50 years old, and he's quizzing me on Helianthus annuus, which was a sunflower. So, but that was Howard. He came here in 1957. Howard did in 1957, and he, as curator of the herbarium and also to teach courses in botany and some other courses as well, he actually developed a number of courses here, study of trees and woody plants, dendrology and stuff, and also plant taxonomy and about grasses and so forth. And he put those all together. I took my first course from him in 1965, and then subsequently in 1966. And he was just unbelievably knowledgeable. I mean, you know, he would tell you something, you'd go to your books and look, sure enough, that's what it was. Or you'd go out in the field and you'd find something, and sure enough, that's the way it was. But he was demanding. If you didn't learn it, I mean, he would help you, but you needed to learn it and you needed to, you know, do it. And so in that respect, I always admired him. It's probably why he was so inspiring to me. And because, like I say, I took his grasses course in the fall of 65, 66 in the spring I took his plant taxonomy course, and it changed my whole life. The rest of my life, he inspired me to spend the next 35 years and more studying grasses and plants. He just, and I was always amazed, like, 10, 12 years ago, I was up in Minnesota in the woods, and it was at the headwaters of the Mississippi, and it was a bad day, a lot of ticks and mosquitoes, and it was raining and everything. And we pulled up into a little parking lot, and this yellow flower flops down on the hood of the car, and I instantly knew what it was. Just in my mind, the scientific name popped in, and I went, oh. And then I thought to myself, how did I know that? And I knew, and then the next thing popped in, I knew that because of Howard C. Reynolds, because he taught that level of knowledge, and he just kind of demanded out of you, and after a while you just did it yourself. And I think he probably inspired a lot of people. In fact, I know he did. The last probably, and we talked a lot in 29 years I was here about various flowers and stuff, and I'd go down to his house, and I brought the magnolias in because this time of the year, where you'd find Howard sometimes when he was 85 and went down there one day, and here's this rickety ladder that's up about the height of that wood at the top. And he's in the tree. I couldn't find him, and he's in the tree taking pictures of this. And I'm like going, holy mackerel, how many 85-year-olds do you know up there, way up in the tree? And all you can think is he's going to fall and break his neck. But he appreciated your concern, but he just went right on doing it. So and that's just kind of how he was. So anyhow, we talked about various things. And I know as we talked over especially the last 10 years, he was concerned because of the tradition that we had here at Fort Hays, which was for 54 years, we had somebody trained in plant taxonomy with a background and also in herbarium management in working with these specimens and stuff. He was worried that wouldn't be continued so that there would be future students like myself that would then go on for 35 years and do things. And I know that his bequest came out of a lot of that discussion, that he was trying to figure out how we could do this, and in the end, I guess he thought that would help with those things. And there really were three things then that he wanted to do as I look back at a lot of our discussions. And one was he wanted his beloved plant collections, and unknowns to me, down by his house, there were tens of thousands of them that I didn't know about. But he wanted those preserved and curated in a collection, and he wanted them here at Fort Hays. He didn't want them to go. He was a big Red Husker fan for years and years and years. But in our discussions, he gradually decided, well, he had been at Fort Hays so long and had so many students that they should go here. So he wanted those here. He wanted to see the tradition continued of a professional taxonomist and herbarium curator out here to curate this just absolutely stunning collection of things. And then the last thing is, he was just an unbelievable, I told you he was a person of high faith, and he was. But he also was a son, an amazing son. I can't give you all the details, but as I read through his diaries and his materials, his mother was seriously ill. He gave up a lot, and the reason it was 1942 until 1959 when he got his PhD was because he tended and cared for his mother, and the level of it was absolutely amazing. And so it was just something that says a lot about Howard. He was not only this very brilliant plant taxonomist, but he was this wonderful son, and he was this person who brought my wife bouquets, and he took a lot of people in the community. Maybe some of you have been on the field trips with him on flower identification things. But he took a lot of people out there. But this last thing he wanted, and I actually took this out of his diary, he said he wanted a gift to honor his mother, George and Marion Reynolds. And in his writing, he says he wants a Reynolds Arboretum in memory of George and Marion Reynolds to benefit students studying tree and shrub ID. So he's this son wanting to honor his parents, but he wants to do it. He's this teacher that wants to be identifying and giving students the skills to go through their life and get jobs and things like that. And I really sincerely believe his gift will go a long ways towards accomplishing that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Joe. I'm Reese Barrick, and I'm the director here at the Sternberg Museum. And I would tell you a little bit about what we plan to do with Howard's gift. And just want to mention, I've only been here a little less than 7 years. I got here in August of 2009, and one of the first things I did was I gave a talk to the Optimist Club out at the Golden Corral. And that's where I first met Howard. I gave a presentation, And as soon as the presentation was over, up popped this 95-year-old gentleman who zipped right up to me, shook my hand, and started talking to me about this cool fossil flower, because he knew I was a paleontologist. And he said, I found this fossil flower. And that was the oldest one ever found in North America. It was just outside of Hayes. Archaeanthus lindenbergi. Okay, I wasn't sure exactly what to make of this out of the blue, other than this was a very enthusiastic and dare I say optimistic gentleman. And he was very articulate, and you could tell that this was going to be a very interesting person to get to know. And I was able to do so over the next few years, and I learned that how true this story was. This wasn't just some ramblings of a 95-year-old gentleman, but everything he said, as Joe says, if you hear it from him, it was true. And the first thing he did was throw out the Latin. He gave me the scientific name. And so he was a very spectacular sort of gentleman to get to know, even at the age of 95. And he's part of a tradition and history that's really special here also. Believe it or not, there have only been 4 curators of the herbarium in Fort Hays State University history. The first one was Elam Bartholomew, for whom the herbarium is named after. And Elam collected hundreds of thousands of plants in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but became the first herbarium director and teaching at Fort Hays in 1929. And he brought the herbarium to the university. And after he passed away, the next herbarium director was somebody who was a colleague of Dr. Elam, and he was a person that, I don't know, people at Fort Hays might recognize a name because I think there's a building named after him, Dr. Frederick Albertson. And he was the curator for another 22 years out of the 43 years that he spent at Fort Hays State University. And the third curator was Dr. Howard Reynolds. And Howard was the curator for 25 years, from 1957 to 1982. And he expanded on the collections greatly in the herbarium. The number of students that he had a profound effect on, in infecting them with a love of learning and of plants, is really truly an astounding number. And including people like Joe Thomason, who was a student who was encouraged to go on and ended up getting a PhD and becoming the 4th curator of the herbarium in the history of Fort Hays. And so it's a pretty impressive list of people and sort of pillars of Fort Hays State University that have been collectors of the herbarium. And Joe's still sort of our emeritus curator of the herbarium, and presently, sort of for the first time in a long time, we don't have an official curator of the herbarium, and that's one of the things, hopefully, that we will be able to work with Howard's gifts. We have Dr. Howard Reynolds' nature trails out here at the museum. And part of the nature trail is surrounded by a creek. It's a beautiful little area. It's about 3 acres. And about half of Howard's gift is going to go towards building an arboretum. So we'll have about a 3-acre arboretum. Howard had a personal arboretum that he used for teaching Fort Hays students for many, many years. And it was a personal point of pride of his. And as Dr. Thomason said, that was one of the things that he was very important to him, that he wanted to have something in memory of his parents, and also a place for students to be able to access, to use, grow, learn, be able to do research, and a place for people in the Hays community to have a quiet place of reflection. And so we will be using part of Howard's gift to create that arboretum here on his nature trails. The other part, half of Howard's gift, goes to the rest of his passion, which is his collection of plants and the herbarium. And it will give us the opportunity to maintain and take care of and expand the collections here at the museum. There's 50,000 plants in our herbarium, and they're from all over the country, all over the world. And they're a reflection of the passion of the curators that we have had at Fort Hays State and of the Elam Bartholomew Herbarium. And as Joe said, there's over 10,000 specimens that have not been curated, that have not been mounted, simply collected by Howard. And if you look at that, if we had a curator that was working 8 hours a day on nothing but mounting and curating those plant specimens, it'd take 3.5 years. So one of the things that we're looking forward to doing is using part of his gift, and as we can collect more gifts that perhaps can be added to Howard's gift, is to work towards getting a collections manager or a curator endowed so that we have the ability to care for the collections in the best way, to have research that takes care of these collections, and to support student research, to get more people like Howard passed on to Joe, and that we can pass on to more students who are going to be out there looking for taking care of understanding the diversity of plants in the world and how they can be conserved. You know, the world is a changing place, and the pressures that humans place on the environment takes a lot of people with a deep understanding of exactly what the organisms are in the world to know where they are, how abundant they are, and how endangered they are. And that's one of the sort of areas that Howard's gift will be able to go forward. Not just taking care of the herbarium, but using that herbarium to help train more students in the love of plants and for the care of plants in our world. So Howard's gift will be one that keeps on giving to a very strong tradition here at Fort Hays State, and I'm very proud to be able to stand up here and let you know that this gift is greatly appreciated and will be going towards a lot of very special areas that will benefit Fort Hays, the students of Fort Hays, and the whole Hays community. And with that, I would like to introduce to you our president of Fort Hays State University, Dr. Mirtha Martin.
Thank you all for being here today as we celebrate the life of someone that has meant so much to Fort Hays State University. I did not have the privilege to be able to meet Dr. Reynolds personally. Thank you. But I understand that he was a larger-than-life gentleman. The very many stories that I have heard about him, the very many stories that I even heard today, the extensive collection of his life's journey that he provided to Fort Hays State University are nothing short of amazing and are nothing short than generous. You know, Dr. Reynolds is the epitome of that person of excellence, those people of excellence that we talk about here at Fort Hays State University. He was somebody who believed in others before self. He was somebody who thought to instill life and passion and generosity in the people that he touched. And obviously he touched many, And his work continues on through the lives of individuals like Dr. Thomason and those that came behind him, and that will continue to enjoy the many gifts that he has now left Fort Hays State University. His generosity will be felt throughout the ages, because that gift that he gave will inspire others to come behind him, to look at what the world has, to look at how do we impact others. You all have heard me say often that education is futile if it is not used to improve the human condition. Well, today, through the generosity of Dr. Reynolds, he is improving the human condition, and he will continue to do so through his legacy. Thank you for coming here today to honor a gentleman that was Fort Hays State University's best, that represents everything that we talk about at Fort Hays State University: mission of purpose, kindness, excellence, and the ability to pass it forward. Thank you.
You know, the first time I met Howard was really when I first arrived here at Fort Hays. There was a function up in the ballroom, and I walked in, and if the ballroom's set up, lots of chairs, we've all been there, or most of us, and there was an older gentleman sitting up in the front row, right in the middle, all by himself. He was, I walk in, and I said, who's the older gentleman up in the front row? His back's to us. He has a cap on, as you can see in the pictures. I don't know if I've ever seen Howard without a hat on. They said, oh, that's Dr. Reynolds. He comes to all events. As Joe said, he's in the front row. He's taking pictures of the speakers, and he loved the food. And that was my first opportunity to meet Howard. And something that we haven't talked about today is, how did he make this gift? He was a real estate tycoon. Howard had a lot of rental properties right across the street of Lewis Field. Really owned a whole block and a half of homes that he rented out to students for years and years. And that's the essence of that gift, is he said, I want that to go to Fort Hays, and I want it to benefit the Sternberg Museum and support the collections that he spent his life collecting. Howard talked about the story of hopping out of a foxhole and shooting a machine gun, and I can just picture Howard, after doing that, seeing a flower there and saying, oh, well, look, it's whatever the scientific name would be. But that's the kind of guy he was. And then he made the point to work with Joe and Reese and letting them know what he wanted done. We have come to know at the foundation that it's very, very important when you're looking at your plans, long-term plans, your legacy plans, to share that information with others. Let them know what you want to get accomplished, how you want that to be accomplished. And I want to personally thank Joe for his help and support through all of this as well. We can't even imagine what Joe has gone through in ensuring that this estate was brought to Fort Hays State. All the work that he did with all the properties in that area, memories that Joe would just soon like to forget to some degree, I think. But thank you, Joe, for all your help in that area. And I would encourage everybody else, as you look at your long-range plans and looking at doing something as a legacy, whether it be to Fort Hays State or to Fort Hays State. Tell people what you want to have accomplished. Share that information. We can keep that information confidential, but it's important that others know what your intent is, because things can change and challenges occur, and it creates issues. And we have learned that over time, and it's very, very important to be able to do it. And it's a good example of a different way a person can make a gift. There was some cash involved, but there was some real estate involved in this area as well, and there were specimens involved. So it was really a three-pronged gift that Howard made, which is fantastic. It will leave a legacy in perpetuity at Fort Hays State and specifically here at the Sternberg Museum for Howard and his parents. And that's exactly what he wanted to get accomplished, and that will be accomplished with this gift. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any, and if not, thank you for being here. Thank you.